Well, that didn't take long. The studio that produced Dogman for DreamWorks is already shutting down, which isn't exactly a great start for DreamWorks' new era of outsourcing projects, now is it? UK-based company Jellyfish Pictures produced the impeccable animation for this movie, as well as some of the bad guys, and now it's going under. See, last year, DreamWorks announced that it would stop doing its animation in-house during its 30th anniversary of all times to choose from, and at the time, reportedly 40 to 50% of DreamWorks animation staff lost their jobs from this very decision, making it so that essentially The Wild Robot was the last in-house production. And I'd been kind of a naysayer for future DreamWorks productions because of this notable fact, but with the release of Dogman, I was starting to see an uptick. The movie was pretty great in all aspects, and maybe outsourcing has a place if the final result's pretty good. But no, maybe the gut reaction was right there. And considering for the in-house staff the final film was The Wild Robot, what a way to go out. But also, what a showcase of, look what this in-house studio was still capable of that they just decided to gut out anyway. You make a movie as brilliant as The Wild Robot, you get axed at the end of the day. You outsource to somebody else like Dogman, you make a movie that's absolutely incredible, you get axed at the end of the day. Joining its Universal stablemate Illumination in a business model of outsourcing their animations to other studios. When we last spoke on this about a year ago now, a primary partner was named in the form of Sony Pictures Imageworks, which was probably the most reassuring news about this whole thing. Reason being, they also worked on all sorts of Sony Animations movies, and those have been faring quite nicely. Not so much on the overworking animators, if the Across the Spider-Verse situation has anything to say about it, which seems to be a symptom of outsourcing in a wider context. And that just seems to be a further trend we're not getting out of, because you see, this is how big studios have gone about their visual effects for years now. And of course, there is a big systemic problem surrounding that. I mean, there are so many cases of visual effects houses who've worked on the likes of Marvel projects, who have workforces massively overworked only for the whole company to go out of business once the project is even finished. These companies are essentially bullied through brutal overtime policies on their contracts, and that bullying just trickles down to the workforce. Which is why this news of Jellyfish Pictures is particularly concerning, as this may well be a sign that DreamWorks is becoming part of the problem. Sony Pictures Imageworks? Their staff treatment has a giant spider-shaped mark on it, but hey, it's still Sony owned, they're not going out of business anytime soon. Jellyfish Pictures, on the other hand, shows that the likes of DreamWorks will go to these smaller companies as well, who are far more vulnerable to be taken advantage of. I mean, whilst Dogman has underperformed with only $129 million at the worldwide box office, for context, even supposed disappointment flushed away made much more than that for DreamWorks back in 2006. Still, it only cost $40 million to make. Why is it that the studio that made this movie that came out 2 months ago suddenly went out of business? They still made a profit. Well, let's have a look, shall we? Of course, this isn't the first time that DreamWorks has outsourced projects, but more specifically for a Captain Underpants adjacent property. Dogman is the second of Dav Pilkey's characters to have been adapted by DreamWorks through an external animation house. Captain Underpants, the first epic movie, and probably last, was produced by Micros Image in Montreal, Canada, and at Technicolor Animation Productions in France in 2017. This also wasn't the first DreamWorks collaboration specifically with Jellyfish Pictures either, as they had previously worked on the Spirit TV series and also contributed to parts of The Bad Guys as well as the Boss Baby family business. They were firmly in the DreamWorks business and clearly a trusted collaborator. Also, whilst having their headquarters in London, they have a lot of their operations in Mumbai, so no doubt there's also some cheap, underhand arrangements going on there as well. Hey there you can make it to the halfway mark of this video. Come along and subscribe if you haven't already for more animated movie news, and then let's get back to the second half of the video. Huzzah! Huzzah, huzzah. The official statement given was firstly attributed to a long-tail impact of COVID, coupled with rising costs and the fallout from the writer and actor strikes. Because remember, whilst they were part of the visual effects and animation business, those strikes did put the brakes on hundreds of productions, which would have affected pretty much every sector. However, the ongoing turmoil in the global animation and VFX industry was also referenced as a cause, which once again ties into the big studios exploiting these these smaller companies, ultimately getting a tiny share of the final product success, and in order to collect that tiny payment, they stretch their workforce and resources to breaking point. A problem that at least appears as though DreamWorks Animation is seemingly now part of. The very fact that this is also a visual effects house, as is Sony Pictures Imageworks, also further blurs that line between the two. In fairness, it's also essentially the same thing, like play your semantics right, and essentially all MCU movies could be considered part animated movies at this point. James Cameron's Avatar movies are completely animated, not to mention all the stuff with the supposed live-action Lion King movies, you know? Nonetheless, there has continued to be clear creative principles dividing animation and visual effects. They use the same software and techniques to do two completely different things creatively. So what does it say that we are now approaching an era where a whole chunk of these kind of jobs will now be happening under the same roof as these tiny CGI battery farms? Like, are we approaching the processed food era of animation at this point? Does it matter where it came from if the results seem fine? Dogman, by most estimates, is a great looking movie with a vibrant creative identity. However, look what it seemingly cost. As much as Pixar's in hot water for its own staff conditions right now, there is something to be said for the fact that their movies are still all made from story to final product almost entirely within-house. There's an authenticity to that, with all departments having that proximity to collaborate and communicate with each other. Something that presumably DreamWorks used to have until last year. Aardman even more so. The labor of their animators are literally imprinted on the characters themselves. Animation is collaboration, the sum of a team effort. And I just wonder if the ethos of that kind of collaboration is gonna get lost the further you stretch said team out. Particularly when some of said team lose their workplace at the end of it, regardless of the high highs or the low lows of the final outcome of your movie. I just worry that with the collapse of Jellyfish Pictures following essentially the kickoff movie of the DreamWorks outsourcing era, is this just a sign of things to come? It seems these days every animation studio has some sort of controversy attached to it. Warner Brothers is still easily the worst one, but there really is something to be said when it seems like so many companies are just racing to the bottom. And unfortunately, it's the actual workers that get the brunt of the hit. I'll just be curious to hear all the specific details of what actually went down. For now though, I'd best end it off there. One day we'll have positive animated news. It's just not happening today. For now, my name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this video. Do tell me your thoughts on Jellyfish Pictures and DreamWorks. Where do you think it's going? Do you think it's more in the middle of who's in fault here? Let me know down below, and I shall see you all in a little bit. Bye-bye!